So I had a meeting with one of our barbers the other day, and he had told me something that was interesting that I don't think anybody's ever said this to me before, but basically he was concerned, not concerned, but he had basically mentioned that he doesn't really know how he's doing in terms of the in the eyes of the client because the amount of feedback that he's been getting lately isn't what he's used to. So he doesn't, and I guess he's been using that to kind of judge on whether or not he's doing a good job or not. And I thought that was an interesting comment, and I thought about it. And so that's why I wanted to make this video because I thought this is basically what I shared with him. And if you don't know who I am, my name's Alex Jaramillo. I own a multi-million dollar barbershop. We've been in business since 2015, and I make these videos because this is the kind of stuff I wish I knew when I was first getting started. So when I was meeting with this barber, he told me that he's not getting as much feedback as he'd like. So naturally, the first thing I asked him was, well, are you asking for feedback? And he said yes. So then the next thing was, okay, so this barber in particular is actually stays pretty busy. And so then the thing that I had thought about, I never really thought about this before, but the most important thing I told him is whether you're retaining clients or not is by far, as a barber, going to be the most important thing that you should be concerned with. Because if you're just starting out in a new shop or in a new location, then you're going to get a lot of feedback at the beginning because typically it's the new clients that are leaving you feedback, and there's because that was their first experience in a lot of cases, and they're just if they're very happy, chances are they're going to leave some good feedback. So you get those fast feedback loops like, oh man, I must be doing a good job. But in my experience, not a lot of like regular clients are leaving feedback after every single visit. Some people do, but in my experience is pretty rare. So if you're only basing like how you're doing off of feedback, then that's going to then you at some point when you start to get more regulars, you're going to start to notice the amount of feedback start to drop. So then I don't know if feedback at that point is the best number to look at. I think it's great to when you're first starting out because you might not know what your retention is yet. And retention usually takes a while to find out. For us, it takes like 3 or 4 months to figure out what your retention was. So, you know, while you're waiting on that, the only thing you can really go off of is how busy you are and what the feedback is. So I get it. That's a great thing to look at in the beginning, like how busy am I? What's my feedback from clients? Awesome. But one thing I mentioned to him was some people might leave good feedback and then not come back because ultimately people vote with their dollars, and you may have clients that you've been cutting for years that have never left you feedback, never left you a Google review, never left you a Yelp review, but they're coming in every single week, right? And then you might have a client that comes in once and they said that they love their haircut and they left you a good review, but you never see them again. So why is that?
Hey, if you're finding this helpful and you want my help personalizing and applying this to your situation, then go to skool.com/barber-mastermind and join my community. It's full of other barbers and hairstylists that are looking to make more money just like you. Hope to see you there. Now back to the video.
Well, I just think you can't just base how good you're doing off of feedback alone. Feedback is important, and that's one of the great ways to like hold yourself accountable, or if you have a team to hold them accountable, because it's not just coming from you, it's coming directly from the clients. But I also think that there is a big portion of clients that if they're not happy, they're not going to let you know, right? Because if we're using that mindset of people vote with their dollars, then they're just not going to come back. Like people, in my experience, like most people don't leave negative feedback. They just won't come back. And I heard this quote somewhere which I really liked, and it's like basically said that the worst customers are the nice guys because they're not going to say anything. They're not going to complain. They're not going to make a scene. They just won't come back. And then what they'll probably do is tell like everybody they know, like probably shouldn't check out that barber. Probably shouldn't check that place out. So those can be some of the worst clients, is the ones that don't leave feedback because you don't really know how to improve. But then when you do get a bad review, what I like to do is knowing that most people won't leave feedback, what I do is I 10x that number. So if we do get a bad review, I tend to look for patterns. But if we get one or two bad reviews and it's about the same person or the same thing, then I'm like, I naturally start to assume like this problem is probably 10 times bigger than what it's showing on the feedback because most people are encountering this and they're just not saying anything. So I think you can use feedback in that way, right? Especially bad feedback is the best feedback because it's usually the most honest, and new clients are typically the most honest as well. Where regulars are just going to be like, "You're great, keep doing what you're doing." Where it's usually the new clients and the clients that are upset that are going to give you the most honest feedback, that are the one that's what you can actually use to improve. But what I told him was, I think that the most important thing that you should use to determine whether you're doing well as a barber is your retention. So, first of all, if you're not tracking your retention, start tracking it. And then once you start to get those numbers coming in, then you can start to figure out where you actually are, like how people actually are. Because ultimately, retention, there's a lot of things that can affect it, but it really just comes down to if did they come back or not. Like it doesn't matter how good the conversation was, how good you think the haircut was, or how good the overall experience was. Either they come back or they don't. There's a lot of things that are not binary in our industry, but that's definitely one of them. And clients either come back or they don't. So if they don't come back, and that's happening a majority of the time, and your retention is low, you should have a good idea if your retention is low is if you're not seeing the same people over and over again. So if you're not tracking it, that's kind of like I guess an old school way of tracking it. Like you can just if you're constantly seeing new faces and you're not getting a lot of repeat clients, well, and that's an indication that you're not retaining people and that there's some work that needs to be done there. But don't just focus on feedback. Like that's great in the beginning because it's immediate. But eventually, I think you should switch your mindset to one of the most important numbers that you need to know as a barber, which is retention. How do I keep these people coming back? And then how good am I at doing that consistently? So ideally, you want to shoot for, I think, 80% plus retention of your clients. If you're doing that, then I think you're doing pretty well. I've seen people get into the 90s, as high as 95% retention, but 80 plus percent, if you get there, you'll never really have a slow day. And ultimately, I think that is the best thing to shoot for. So I'd rather be retaining 80, 90% of my clients and never get any feedback. I don't know about you guys. I'd rather retain all of our clients and never get another Google review again. Because ultimately, that's what pays the bills, is whether you're retaining your clients or not. So, so if you don't know what your retention is, figure out what it is. Use the feedback if that's all you got. But the ultimate test to see if you're as good as you think you are as a barber is, are the people that you cut coming back? So hopefully you found that helpful. This is something that took me a long time to learn. Gotta go.